It's 3 years later. He's fighting Terence Crawford. I looked this up. One, it feels like Canelo is much older than he is. He's 35. He has won 62 fights. His fight is like 62-3 and whatever the draw number is. Terence Crawford is actually 2 years older than him, but Terence Crawford is undefeated. The last time I watched Terence Crawford fight somebody, he put them paws on Errol Spence in a way that I don't think we thought was possible. I have also seen Terence Crawford fight in person because ESPN used to have the Top Rank contract. So he fought one night right after the Heisman ceremony. So we pulled up. This is when I realized how famous Desmond Howard was. All of us had really good seats except for Desmond Howard, who was in Terence Crawford's corner. Just in the corner. But what is like the first thing you think about when you know this fight is coming up is what about this matchup?
Man, it's kind of bizarre that it's happening. And it's kind of a set of circumstances that, you know, with the injection of money and influence from Turki Al-Sheikh, it's a fight that without this current boxing climate just never would have happened, because Terence Crawford, he's technically moving up 2 weight classes, but really moving up 3 weight classes. He's only fought at 154 pounds one time, and he's going to be facing Canelo at 168. But it's one of those fights that boxing fans, or more casual boxing fans, and I don't use that as a pejorative whatsoever. I don't care what level of fidelity you have to the sport. Come and tune in whenever you want. But people see them on the pound for pound list, and they argue about who's better, who's the best fighter in the world. Is it Canelo? Is it Terence Crawford? Is it Naoya Inoue? And they want to put these two in there together. It's bizarre that it's happening, but it'll go a long way to kind of defining who is the best fighter of this particular era. And I think you have to put this era in a silo that doesn't include Floyd and doesn't include Manny, because if you do, they're kind of clearly ahead. But for this modern era, this kind of defines who is the guy. And it's sort of unfair to Crawford in a sense, because he's taking such a colossal risk. He's basically having to transform his body. Moving up 3 weight classes is no joke. Going from 147 to a muscular 168 is something that some people take years to make happen. And Terence Crawford's going to do it and try and fight someone.
Well, are you surprised that they didn't meet somewhere in the middle on this?
A little surprised, but at the same time, you know, as big of a star and as great as Terence Crawford is, Canelo Alvarez is really the nucleus of the boxing world, and he can call the shots. And I'm sure that he did not want to have any concessions when it came to weight. But also, Terence Crawford has that thing where I think he wants the biggest challenge possible. And it's something that was kind of... he was denied that opportunity in some senses while he was fighting with Top Rank, because it was during a period of time in boxing where there was some severe separation in terms of networks and promotions, and they just wouldn't work together. It wasn't Top Rank's fault, it wasn't ESPN's fault, but there were all these fighters over here on PBC that Terence Crawford never was able to match up with until he finally got that Errol Spence fight. And I think there is that thing in Terence's mind where he's thinking, hey, I'm 37, 38 years old. I want to go for the biggest challenge possible. And if I can do this, if I can move up 3 weight classes and beat Canelo, I'm in a different stratosphere when it comes to how I'm remembered after I retire.
Now, you mentioned the risk, obviously, of we're just talking about going up the weight classes, but we're talking about going up the weight classes with somebody whose calling card is power, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. And that's what makes this a really fascinating style matchup as well. If the fight starts and Canelo isn't immediately physically overwhelming to Crawford, it becomes really interesting, because Canelo's calling card these days is more power. The younger version of Canelo was a lot more mobile. The version we saw at 154, 160, the version we've seen at 168 and during his dalliances at light heavyweight is a lot more judicious with his punch output. He can kind of nonchalantly walk forward, pick shots off, and then throw power shots, and everything he throws is heavy and everything he throws is meaningful. The question is whether that approach can work against Crawford, who is going to be more nimble, he's going to be more mobile, and I don't know that the level of nonchalance that Canelo has been able to have in recent fights, I don't know if that works against someone who's as intelligent and as mobile as Crawford. So we're going to have to see a version of Canelo that we haven't seen in at least a couple fights.
So how does the power game work for a guy like Crawford going up in the fight, like his own power? Because I'm talking about this at first in the context of, okay, now you're dealing with somebody with heavy hands and now you're going up to that fight. But I'm trying to think like to myself, like, for example, and I'm not nearly as versed in this as you, obviously, but like I think of when Roy Jones went up to fight as heavyweight. None of us were expecting Roy Jones to knock John Ruiz out, even though we had watched him knock out just about every light heavyweight and cruiserweight that had been ahead of him. So what is the power translation for a guy like Crawford going up?
I would say it's not the most likely result that he hurts Canelo, but Terence Crawford, even at 154, he can keep you honest with his shots. And there's a difference. You look at Floyd Mayweather in the latter stages of his career, the Money Mayweather era of him. No one would think of him as a power puncher, but just saying, oh, he doesn't have knockout power, well, that didn't mean that guys could just rush in on him and go after him and say, oh, this doesn't hurt at all. I'm just going to do whatever I want. It doesn't work like that. Like, even if Terence Crawford doesn't knock you out, you're going to feel his shots. And Canelo has one of the best chins of this era. He has an all-time great chin. We've really maybe one time seen Canelo even buzzed in a fight, and that was a long, long time ago, since before he was fighting on the main card of HBO. So I would say it's probably unlikely that we see Crawford hurt Canelo, but that doesn't mean that he can't get Canelo's respect with his power.
Yeah, let me tell you, Corey has been kind enough through the years, especially as I've been in New York, to help me get in and check out some of these fights. And I watched a fight. I think it was a Triple G fight with Corey's dad. And we sat next to each other. And I think that was the fight when I learned something I've talked about on this show before, that ain't nothing more underrated in sports than the jab. We think of the jab as just this thing that you do to get these dudes off of you. Man, I was watching... It was that fight with the dude that had the bullet in his spine. That was the fight before the Triple G fight, right? It was some dude with a bullet in his spine, and they couldn't do the requisite CAT scan on him because they were afraid the bullet would start moving and he would get paralyzed. And the theme of this fight night was Kazakhstan defeats African Americans. This dude with the bullet in his spine was getting his ass kicked by whoever the next Kazakh great was supposed to be. And then Triple G went up and hit some dude with a body punch uppercut to knock him out against the ropes. And I was like, we are really underselling how hard these cats are hitting. But I was watching those jabs and I was like, oh, we got to change the way we think about all of this, right? Like, even a Floyd Mayweather, it's kind of like trying to hoop against somebody that's in the NBA, but they only average 17 points a game. They gonna get for 50 hooping against you.
Listen, any fighter that you see on TV, if you don't know how to fight and they hit you with a jab, that is the end of your work week at minimum. Listen, I don't advocate for street fighting, but I will say, if you ever had to get into a street fight, if you could just learn to throw a correct jab, you will get yourself out of a lot of problems.
No, I told you about that time when Calvin Brock was fighting. I went and covered his camp in California, Pennsylvania, and I walked in there, and it was a dude. This is why I love working with you, because you knew who all the boxers were. David Cadieux. He was a French-Canadian heavyweight, and I walked in, and he was hitting that heavy bag, and brother, I was listening to that chain shake, and I was like, oh, man. I have drastically misunderstood the magnitude of what's going on in these boxing matches. Like these cats are throwing. And so then when you start talking about somebody like Canelo at 168, and it's even when he was fighting at lower weights than that, he's one of the few guys that, to me, when I would look at guys fighting in those weight classes and I'm looking at how built they are, he looked big at 154.
Yeah, he's always been stocky and well built. His frame has moved up perfectly every step of the way. And at 168, he's very, very comfortable now. He's been there for a couple of years now. And again, even flirted with 175 pounds. So 168 for Canelo is wound tight and in perfect condition at this point. And his power has built over the years. And he's evolved from a guy that I think at one point wanted to be seen as more of a defensive wizard, was kind of taking some tactics that he learned from Floyd in that loss that he took against him, was a little bit more of a back foot fighter at a certain point, and now has kind of blended it into this perfect fusion of the guy that's moving forward, which is always pleasing for the fans, and it's pleasing to the judges too, because they see you forcing the fight, and that goes a long way on the scorecards. But he's able to defend while moving forward, which is one of the most difficult things you can do. It's a lot easier to defend while you're moving backwards. When you're moving forwards and you're thinking offensively and trying to pick shots off or slip them, it's an unbelievably difficult combination of skills to put together.
Now, this is a broader question than just the fights, and we may get back to like fight stuff, but this is a question I wanted to ask because I think those of us who observe it from a distance can notice this. I think as Americans, we lose sight of a lot of things about the world. And one of the things about the world that I think we lose sight of is that Mexico has nearly 150 million people. Like, this is Mexican Independence Day fight. Floyd used to love to fight on this weekend and Cinco de Mayo because he was a troll, but also because there are 150 people just in Mexico itself before we start talking about Mexicans in the United States. Speaking in the economics of fighting, like, how important is somebody like Canelo Alvarez?
I mean, listen, he is... So I'll introduce a topic that maybe we'll get into also, but the boxing version of Jordan versus LeBron, the GOAT debate that you could just bring up anytime, it's not actually who's the greatest boxer of all time, because most people agree that it's Sugar Ray Robinson, and it's tough to argue against it. The argument that you can have ad nauseum is who's the greatest Mexican boxer of all time. And you could put Canelo in that conversation. You could put Julio Cesar Chavez in that conversation. Some people like Mike Tyson think that it's Salvador Sanchez. What is absolutely true is that this is the first time that, and I used this phrase before, the nucleus of boxing, the biggest star in the sport, the central focus of it, has been a boxer from Mexico. The cash cow is Canelo Alvarez. Every time he fights, and my understanding is that this fight won't be on TV Azteca in Mexico, but every other time, basically, every notable fight that you've seen of Canelo airs on live free television in Mexico, and each and every time eclipses 33 million viewers. It's a massive, massive audience that is integral to the health of the sport. To give you another anecdote, I just came back from Mexico where I was calling a great fight on DAZN between Eduardo Nunez and Christopher Diaz. If you're bored and you want to see a banger of a fight, go back and check it out. It was in Los Mochis, Mexico. We did the 4 fights that were a part of the DAZN broadcast. We were on our way out the arena. Bo, there were 14 more fights that night, and no one left the arena. The world title fight was over. There were 14 more fights. I don't even know that they knew who the guys were that were walking up. They were walking guys not with ring music while people were still in the ring to get more fights out there. No one left. That is the level of dedication and the fervence of the fandom for boxing in Mexico. It's out of this world. And until you're there, you can't really fully understand it.
Well, is Canelo also, and you and I have talked about this, and I remember at one point it felt like we may have been being a little too general, and then I went on a tour of the Mayan ruins in Mexico, and I was like, oh, this is where it comes from. Our Mexican brothers and sisters, as much as they like people who win fights, they also really like people who take punishment. Like, the idea of the Mayan idea was you pay homage to the gods with blood, right? Your own blood. Like, that is the sacrifice. Your willingness to endure punishment is what makes you a hero. And so it's interesting when I hear you talk about Canelo as being a defensive wizard, because that's almost counter to what any of us think about with Mexican fighters.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Some of the most beloved Mexican fighters of all time, they don't have pristine records necessarily, and they are loved even if they lose. They're loved for simply for being entertaining. There are names from Mexican boxing history. A guy like Jorge Arce is on the Hall of Fame ballot, may or may not get into the Hall of Fame, but there was a 5-year period where he was one of the 3 most popular fighters in the country, and it's because he bled, he took punishment, came to the ring on a horse with a lollipop. There were like the theatrics and the machismo of it just appealed to the audience. And I think Canelo, he talks the right way, and he delivers fantastic knockouts every once in a while too. And again, like I said, this new version of Canelo, you see him moving forward, and sometimes just even being the nominal aggressor, the guy who is on the front foot chasing after someone, sends the right message to the audience. And that, I think, has helped, especially in this portion of his career, to further boost his popularity.
As I hear this, I now think that maybe the infamous Julio Cesar Chavez Meldrick Taylor fight was the perfect fight for a Mexican fighter. Get your ass kicked and somehow win. Get it all at one time.
That's precisely. Yeah, exactly.
I need to go back and watch that fight because I just remember at the time people talking about it. How could this possibly happen? And now that I know more about the world, the idea that it could be 2 seconds left in the fight. Never mind. We've had enough. What? Like, can you imagine in this conspiratorial era that we have right now if that would have happened?
Dude, if that fight happened, like if that happens, if Terence Crawford does that and gets stopped by Canelo in that fashion, let's say on Saturday night, your timeline will be filled with conspiracies for the next several months.